Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canadiens Connection Podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained. My name is Michael Spinella, and I'll be your host for the next hour. This is episode 251 of the Canadiens Connection Podcast, and I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by my co-host and the editor of the Hockey News Montreal, the founder and the president of Rocket Sports, Rick Stevens. And Rick, how are you doing on this incredibly hot day?
It's summer, all right. We're into July, and it's that beautiful Montreal summer weather, which can be oppressive at times. But it also means that if it's summer, we're into the whole Montreal festival schedule. We had F1 weekend. There's Just for Laughs, and there's Comic-Con, there's Osheaga. And this past week was the Montreal Jazz Festival. Now, did you have a chance to pop in on any of the open stages?
Yeah, I popped by for some of the free shows on Tuesday. I got to see Domi and JD Beck. Nice. Really awesome duo, drummer and a piano player. It's one of those shows where I walked away, and some of our listeners might know this, and I know you know this, but I do play the drums in my free time. After watching JD Beck play the drums, I can no longer call myself a drummer.
Well, no, don't be too hard on yourself. You're still a drummer in our books.
Yeah, I'm going to have to start watching some of his videos and trying to replicate what he does, but insanely good drummer, really good jazz festival. I've had a chance to stop by a few times since moving to Montreal, and really nice that there's lots of free music and free stages for everyone to enjoy.
It's incredible, and yeah, the music on the free stages is excellent, and it gives you an opportunity to hear some artists that you might not have heard before.
Absolutely. And speaking of things you might not have heard before, we did have the Montreal Canadiens Development Camp go down this past week. Lots of prospects you might know, some names you might not be familiar with, and that's one of the things we'll be talking about here in the first segment, along with all of our other Montreal Canadiens updates. And then segment 2, we have a Rocket Sports Mailbag. It's the first one of the summer. It's been a while since we've done this, and since the draft has gone by, free agency has gone by, lots of good questions from our listeners, so we want to take some time to answer those. And then in segment 3, we'll turn it back to our listeners again for our Have Your Say segment. Our Canadiens Connection question of the week is, which prospect impressed you the most at the Canadiens Development Camp? And Rick, for those interested in reaching out and letting us know, or if they have any kind of comment or something they want to tell us about our show, what's the best way for them to reach out to us?
Well, I tell you, they've been reaching out post-draft. They were all over our text line and our email and our social media. But we've emptied it now, and that's why this mailbag issue we've put together, the edition of the podcast. So it's free, and if you want to send us a text, the text is 5853-ROCKET, 5853-ROCKET. That's the Rocket Sports text line. If you have more to say and you need to send us an email, you're welcome to do so at hello@rocketsportsmedia.com.
Also, feel free to reach out to us on our social media. Just make sure you're following at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Also, check out the website, canadiensconnection.fm. And there were a couple of really interesting stories from this past week. Starting things off, this past Friday, it was the anniversary of the Canadiens selecting Juraj Slafkovský with the first overall pick in the 2022 NHL Draft here in Montreal. And here's Kent Hughes to announce the pick.
With our first pick in the 2022 NHL Draft, les Canadiens de Montréal sont fiers de repêcher from the Slovakian national team and TPS Turku, Juraj Slafkovský.
Quite a reaction, and you were there at the Bell Center, as were many of our Rocket Sports team and our Rocket Sports listeners, who we provided tickets for. And that reaction was not. It was somewhat. There was shock. There was O's. There was boos. There was all kinds of a mixed reaction. And fortunately, in the year that has passed, I think fans have warmed up to Juraj Slafkovsky. And I was on Friday. I thought it was nice that his dad put out a tribute to that moment, also named Juraj Slafkovsky. And made mention of the three players from Slovakia who were taken in the first round of last year's draft.
Yeah, being there, honestly, it's going to be a moment I will never forget. Everyone expecting that Shane Wright pick, and when Kent Hughes goes up there and says Juraj Slafkovsky, I don't know that that recorded audio does it all the justice that it was, but it's certainly a mixed reaction. You definitely heard some boos. I think a surprise for most people in the audience that night.
For sure.
But another thing that went down this past week was development camp, and Paul Byron had a chance to speak to the prospects, and he brought some very insightful words to camp attendees.
In the NHL, some games I played 8 minutes, some games I played 14 minutes, some games I played 11 minutes. My role was completely different. Went from being the guy to being kind of like a utility knife, and that was good for me. I was comfortable in that role. You needed a guy for an energy shift, one shift, boom, I did it. You need a guy to go kill a penalty, boom, I did it. You need a guy to sit for 9 minutes, encourage the guys, drink water, I'll do that too. You know? I never pouted about it, I always had a good attitude. You know, there's a lot of things worse in life than playing fourth line minutes in the NHL, so I always kind of kept a positive attitude.
Wow. That's exactly what you want to hear from a career NHLer, a successful NHLer, speaking to a group of prospects. And it was Paul Byron. Also, Nick Suzuki was there, and Nick talked about the message that they've received from Marty St. Louis saying, find your chair. There are a number of chairs, find yours and fight for it, which I also thought was a good message. But with respect to Paul Byron, let's keep in mind that Paul Byron has not had a contract. His contract expired on June 30th. So we wonder if he is going to carve out some sort of role with the Canadiens. Remember, he last year was injured and oftentimes sat with the injured players, but there was also times that he sat in the suite with Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes. So we wonder about what role he might have with the development staff or with the organization in some way, being an advisor. I just thought this message was excellent. You know, everyone has expectations, but you have to morph yourself into a role that meets the team needs, and he did that. He was the guy. He was the utility player. Or, as he said, you know, sometimes you might sit for 9 minutes in a row and you drink water and you encourage your teammates. But there's worse things that you could be doing than playing in the National Hockey League. A terrific message from Byron.
Yeah, really like to see it. And, you know, not every single player or prospect is going to turn out to be a star. You do need those utility knives. You need those guys to come in and find a role for themselves and work hard. So definitely love the message, and nice to see that Paul Byron's making some appearances around. I'd like to see him stick around with the organization.
For sure.
So make sure you're checking out Habs Notepad, Habs headlines, and feature articles throughout the busy offseason at thn.com/Montreal. Over this past week, Montreal did not make a big splash during the free agent frenzy, but they made a few, I think, depth signings, among other things. Starting off, the Montreal Canadiens signed forward Philippe Mailloux and defenseman Brady Keeper to 1 year, 2-way contracts. So I think these are definitely depth signings, possibly more for the AHL than the NHL.
Yeah, I think so. You have Mailloux, who is 30 years old. He's a small forward. He played the last 2 seasons in the KHL, but he has tons of AHL experience, over 200 AHL AHL games, just 2 games in the NHL. But I think that he'll be one of the players that they'll be looking forward to be one of the leaders in Laval. Brady Keeper, he's a right shot defenseman, good size. He was in Abbotsford last year and has considerable experience in the AHL as well.
An interesting signing by the Montreal Canadiens. They signed forward Elias Anderson to a 1-year, 2-way contract. Anderson is a former 7th overall pick in 2017 by the New York Rangers. He's not made the jump to being a full-time NHLer, although he's been with 2 different franchises in the New York Rangers and the Los Angeles Kings.
This one's curious. Elias Anderson, a Jeff Gorton pick, as you said, 7th overall in the 2017 draft. Hasn't been able to make that successful jump to the NHL. But he, a point-a-game player with the Ontario Reign, the AHL affiliate of the Los Angeles Kings, point-a-game player last year in the AHL. So this looks like another project for the Canadiens, maybe for Marty St. Louis. But this was, this is one of these long shots that might pay off for the organization.
Feel-good signing for the Montreal Canadiens as they re-signed forward Raphael Harvey-Pinard to a 2-year contract extension worth $2.2 million. Last season, he got into 34 games, put up 14 goals and 20 points. He had an opportunity that I think was only really there because of the amount of injuries on the Montreal Canadiens. But he took advantage, and I was rather impressed. We'll see if he can keep it up.
Yeah, he's a hard-nosed player. He'll go to the net, and that paid dividends last season. Even made his way up to the top line, and on a team at the bottom of the standings that was full of injuries, he didn't look out of place. It's going to be more difficult for him this season. And the thing that works a little against him is that he's waiver exempt, so it's easy to send him to Laval. And with the number of forwards that the Montreal Canadiens have, and Kent Hughes has mentioned that he'd like to move some of them because there is obviously a logjam. It's going to be tough. We know that at every turn from the end of season, the garbage day clean out press conference, and every time he's had a chance, he says he wants to be in Montreal. And yes, that's a good goal to have. But he's going to have to work pretty hard over the summer. His skating is below NHL level, and he knows that. That's something he'll be trying to improve over the summer. And I think he's pretty well aware that there's going to be heavy competition at camp for those forward positions. But we wish him well with that. If you go to our website, you'll thn.com/Montreal, you'll find an article that came out by Chris G on the press conference that Raphael Harvey-Pinard participated in after his signing.
Canadiens prospect Bogdan Konishikov has extended his KHL contract until the end of the 2025-26 season. So that's a 4th rounder from this past draft, 110th overall. 20 years old, he's a defenseman. Not a ton of information on him.
Yeah, it's this is one of these off the board kind of picks. His contract goes to the 25-26 season. He's an undersized right shot defenseman, 5'11", but has done pretty well for himself in the KHL. Played 64 games last year for Torpedo, and averaging 21 minutes a game, and played on both special teams, which is unusual for such a young player. But the coach of the team, Igor Larionov, kind of fell in love with him. And Bogdan also, I think, grabbed the spot in that he was willing to block shots. He would kill plays pretty well with his stick, and he's got lots to work on, including strength and dealing with being undersized. But it's an interesting pick and one we're going to follow. And I guess the only other point that I'll make is that he's represented by Dan Milstein, which is one of the most powerful agents in the NHL. And Dan Milstein, if you're a budding Russian defenseman, you want to be with Dan Milstein. He has Sergachev and Romanov, Zadorov, Zub, Zaitsev as his clients. So that all bodes well for this Canadiens prospect.
Yeah, big thumbs up for Zub, big thumbs down for Zaitsev, I think. That's fair. More news on defensemen signing contracts. The Canadiens signed defenseman David Reinbacher to a 3-year entry-level contract, so their 5th overall pick is locked up for the next 3 years.
Well, you knew this was coming, and around the league, teams are signing their first-round picks and others to their entry-level contracts. This was a big moment for David Reinbacher. There was a little video clip of him signing his contract. He called his family, and it was quite emotional for him as he made that commitment to the Montreal Canadiens. And I think it capped off, from the draft to development camp and then signing his contract. It was quite a whirlwind for him. I thought it was interesting that he was asked whether he would keep his training camp number or whether he had asked for another, and he said, well, he's had different numbers over the years. He really likes number 9. You're not getting number 9, David. He likes number 6. Now, Chris Weidman has that, and it was Shea Weber before. Or number 64 was Corey Schoeneman, I think, last year, and Schoeneman off to the Colorado organization. So maybe there's a chance for that number when he makes the jump to the Montreal Canadiens.
So we have quite a few Laval Rocket signings to talk about, so let's get to our Habs prospect report.
This edition of the Rocket Report is brought to you by AHL.Report, your premier source for the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens. AHL.Report is a proud member of the Rocket Sports Media Network.
So the Laval Rocket has signed defenseman Toby Paquette-Bizon, who you are probably very familiar with. He's familiar with the Rocket organization. They've also signed Noah Lowen, forwards Jared Davidson, forward Alex Olivier Voyer, and Jakov Novak, along with goaltenders Strauss Mann and Zachary Emond. Like I said, we know Paquette-Bizon as he was part of the organization previously. He spent last year with the Ontario Reign, though. A couple of goaltenders coming into the organization with experience mostly in the ECHL, and we'll see how that plays out. And Jakov Novak is a former Ottawa Senators draft pick that went unsigned.
And we remember Jared Davidson. We talked about Jared Davidson an awful lot. One of the few places who were highlighting his terrific season with Seattle in the WHL last year and the run to the Memorial Cup. So nice signing there for Laval. Strauss Mann is an interesting one. Was with the University of Michigan and had terrific numbers with Michigan. In fact, he was the captain in his 3rd year, I believe, with the University of Michigan, their first goaltender who was a captain in 75 years. Then he got into a bit of controversy with the coach, and the coach had his issues as well, and he went off to the Swedish League and played in the Olympic Games, played at the World Championships, trying to make a return to North American hockey, and as you said, did that last year. Mostly, kind of split the season between the ECHL and AHL, and I expect, there's lots of movement with respect to Canadiens goaltending, but I expect that he'll spend some time in Trois-Rivières this season.
Yeah, you can never have enough goaltenders, especially when the Montreal Canadiens have been having as many injuries as they have had. So I don't mind bringing in a couple of guys with some pro experience at least.
Yep.
So the Montreal Canadiens Development Camp ran from July 1st to the 4th. So this is an opportunity for fans to see the prospects. It's the opportunity for the organization to see their prospects, work them out, see where they're at. And quite a few guys, quite a few familiar faces, as we saw Philippe Michard, we saw Logan Mailloux, Joshua Waugh, Petteri Nurmi, and some others. Any prospects that you wanted to point out there, Rick?
Vincent Rohr, who you did a feature interview with earlier this season, and countryman of David Reinbacher and Lane Hutson, Logan Mailloux, Jaden Struble, the goaltending, Jakob Dobas and Jacob Fowler, and a real nice selection of talent at the camp.
Yeah, so they were put through a lot of on-ice drills, a lot of off-ice fitness testing as well. Tons of videos on the Montreal Canadiens Twitter feed. You get to see them riding a stationary bike like mad. There's also some weightlifting and one that involved picking up what looked like a deadlift and doing a jump. Crazy to see the fitness level of some of these prospects.
Especially in July. It's July. And they're expected to be at top form. Some of them haven't played for a few months, and they were all looking rather good. As far as on ice, typically a development camp is run by the AHL coaching staff. That's how it's been done in the past. This one was run primarily by Adam Nicholas, although Jeff Wool and his staff were there as well. And I think what I saw is that most of the drills were game action. They weren't just, skating up and down, or they were some sort of game scenario that Nicholas placed the prospects in. And it got pretty intense at times, especially, as I say, for July. One thing that was a little different, we saw a monitor on the bench, and the video was live, and Nicholas would stop the action and go over and have a teaching moment with video that had just been captured, either to provide an example or provide a correction. It's something that the Toronto Maple Leafs have been doing in their development camp for 8 or 9 years, but this is the first time we saw that with the Canadiens, and there was no stray pucks that disturbed the monitor. Each NHL team does a development camp, but they all do it a little bit differently. They even do it at different times. I thought it was interesting, kind of following up on Connor Bedard. The Chicago Blackhawks development camp is done entirely off ice, which is fascinating, and we'll have to dig more into the reasoning for that. But a little bit different development camp for the Canadiens and their prospects, and I thought it was, and of course ending with the fan favorite, which is 2 scrimmages.
Yeah, they did a little bit of team building too. Lots of fun to be had for these prospects. You might have to explain what was up with them riding around in these go-karts. It seemed like they had a track set up too. That was interesting to watch. And like you said, the scrimmage happened, 2 different games. Team Red won the first game 1-0, courtesy of a goal from Jack Smith. They beat the 2022 prospect Quentin Miller, who was in net. And then in game 2, it was tied 1-1, went to the shootout, and Team Red won in the shootout. I believe Logan Mailloux got one of those shootout goals too.
Yeah, Alex Newhook was good, and it's those prospects that you might forget about. Jack Smith, kind of like a Sean Farrell, and Alex Newhook, kind of a long-term project, and he looked pretty good at the camp as well.
It's Luke Tuck, the one that we have now?
Sorry.
Or am I?
No, yes, of course.
Too many Tucks.
Too many.
Yeah, I think, like we said, a few standouts. For me, Logan Mailloux and Lane Hutson were the ones that seemed to look the best. I know Logan Mailloux's maybe a little bit older than some of the other guys, but he seems to be coming in and proving that he should deserve an opportunity. And what else can we say about Lane Hutson? Seems to be very skillful, and David Reinbacher had a lot of great things to say about Lane.
probably you get the puck, skate it out a little bit, and then you give it to him and just start watching. No, he's a good offensive player. I would say I hope it's not too high for him, but for the media now, he's probably in the next Cale Makar. He's so good on the skates. He can do some so crazy stuff on the ice. So I would love to play with him one day, make a pair with him, and then we'll see. He and me and all the other guys, I guess we have a long journey, a lot of work to do, that we can play one day for Montreal and do the goal we have to do.
David Reinbacher is adorable. He's naive. He's very genuine. He's open with his emotion. He'll learn and he'll tame that back a little bit. But I thought it was interesting. He said, I hope that the media don't take and run with this, which of course they did, and both about him wanting to or enjoying being paired with Lane Hutson, but also Lane Hutson being the next Cale Makar. And of course that was every headline. As soon as he said it, the headlines were spread around social media.
Yeah, of course. And do I think Lane Hudson's going to be like Cale Makar? It might be a little bit of a stretch, but certainly a nice compliment coming from David Reinbacher. And I guess to return the favor, Lane Hutson talked about David Reinbacher himself.
That's tough. I'm trying to think. I mean, he's the next David Reinbacher. He's gonna be really good. You can see it. He wants to get better. He wants to be good every day, and he's going to be really good.
Brilliant answer. Brilliant answer. He's going to be himself. He's going to be his own unique player. That's NCAA media training for you right there. That was a brilliant answer. It doesn't get him in trouble. I thought he was very quick in answering that. And was very complimentary, just the same for David Reinbacher. I don't think that in my list of standouts for the on ice performance of the prospects, David Reinbacher wasn't in there. He was certainly front and center with all the off ice activities, and he was delightful in all of his media opportunities. But I think that Lane Hutson was perhaps the star of the camp. Every single day, every single drill, he was. I found him as the best player on the ice.
Well, let's hear what Rob Ramage had to say about David Reinbacher.
I like him. He's a big rock kid, and a lot of nerves. It's been a difficult month. Combine. He hadn't been on the ice until Friday. So, he really, I was talking to him just as we were walking off the ice, and he was disappointed. He didn't score. He had chances and everything else. Hey, it's July, for crying out loud. So he just wanted to do so well for everybody.
Rob Ramage, of course, the director of development, and knows these prospects pretty well. And I think that Rob Ramage there was, if you read him, was acknowledging that yes, it was not necessarily Reinbacher's ability that was his full potential wasn't shown on the ice at development camp, but provided a number of reasons why that was the case. And listen, with all the attention of the draft and what he was put through, it's understandable that he maybe didn't put forth his best effort.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about David Reinbacher in segment 2. I have the feeling we have some questions about this player. But let's hear from a goalie. Jakub Dobas got to talk about his path to improvement.
Well, definitely it comes with experience. I think, the more games I will play and the older I get, I will become as them. So I just need experience, and I didn't have a problem, going to college and compete against better guys. I'm a very competitive guy, so I don't like to get scored on or lose. So I think my mentality will push me, and I will have a good season.
I could have played a dozen Jakub Dobas quotes. This guy is he's amazing to talk to. He was maybe a little unknown, had a great college career, and then came to the Laval Rocket at the end of last season. Unfortunately, and I think this was a mistake by the Rocket, that he didn't get into games, and he said that all he needs is experience. He needs games. He said that he didn't think that the pace between college and the AHL was a whole lot different, but that the players themselves were much more skilled, and that he looked forward to the opportunity in playing against them. He went on and talked about he's going to spend the summer in St. Louis training, as he's done for the past few years. His brother lives there, and his family is going to come over from Czechia to visit. And he said that part of his workout over the summer, as it has been, is going to involve boxing and hot yoga. So he's going to be all set to go for Laval in the fall.
Very well-rounded, and sounds like he has some good short-term goals. We also hear from Owen Beck, who's got some short-term goals for himself.
Yeah, I mean, we just got to focus on the summer. I've got some short-term goals, where I want to be. Obviously, trying to make this team as a 19-year-old is no easy challenge, and that's something that I want to strive for. If not, it's getting there the following year, and having another successful year in junior, and working to get there next season.
We talked about the incredible season that Owen Beck had, involving World Juniors and gold medals and getting traded and making his NHL debut, Memorial Cup. He's described as one of the smartest players in junior hockey, and that's going to help him. He perfectly understands the challenge that he has, especially with the number of forwards that the Canadiens have. But his short-term goal is to make this team. Otherwise, he'll go back to junior. Rob Ramage was very complimentary of him, and said that he's smart, reliable, consistent, a coach's dream, and said this guy is going to play. Whether it's this year or the following year, we don't know yet, but he's going to play.
And our final audio clip comes from Rob Ramage. He's talking about Logan Mailloux.
He had a great year. Every time you watched him, whether it was myself or Frankie or Nick, he just looked like an NHL player out there. It's the biggest thing is he needs to play. He hasn't played a lot of hockey in the last 3 years, but he took ownership of being a leader on that team. They overachieved. There's no way I thought they'd make it to the finals. And obviously good coaching with Dale Hunter, but he played 30 minutes a game, and they were solid for the most part. So yeah, his development's really coming. I mean, we'll see what happens, and he's going to push for sure. That's his goal. He'd like to be in Montreal. If it's Laval, it's nothing wrong with developing there either.
He's going to push for sure, talking about Canadiens training camp in the fall. Also mentioned that Logan Mailloux looks like an NHL player, and certainly at development camp. He took no prisoners. He was very physical. He was intimidating at times, and yet at the same time he was the leadership qualities that many of his teammates had talked about from last year with London. He was guiding people on the ice. He was offering praise. He was certainly one of the standouts at development camp.
So if you're looking for more information on what happened at development camp, you can find all that content and more information about Canadiens prospects at thn.com/Montreal. There was quite a bit of news around the league in terms of free agency. Too many signings for us to mention even, but we'll just highlight some of the standouts. We'll go with Dmitry Orlov signing a long-term deal with the Carolina Hurricanes. Matt Duchene, who was bought out by the Nashville Predators, finds a home in Dallas. Ryan O'Reilly heads into Nashville on a 4-year deal. I guess that's your Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson replacement. Jason Zucker goes from Pittsburgh to Arizona. Alex Killorn takes a huge deal with the Anaheim Ducks. I'm surprised at just how much he was able to get there. Ottawa Senators find their goaltender in Eunice Korpisalo. And I will mention too, Vladimir Tarasenko still looking for a contract. He just recently fired his agent, and he's on to his third agent in the past few years.
And we can't forget Milan Lucic going back to Boston.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's the perfect marriage there.
Well, hopefully our Brzezinski is around for those Boston games, But coming up, we'll take our first break here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. We'll hear from our sponsors, DraftKings, and it's our big topic segment. So stay with us. This is Canadiens Connection here on Rocket Sports Radio.
New customers download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. Bet just $5 to score $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's code THPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, call 800-327-5050 or visit gamblinghelplinema.org. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Kansas, call 1-800-522-4700 on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, KS. In West Virginia, gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. All games regulated by the West Virginia Lottery. Please play responsibly. In partnership with Hollywood Casinos at Charlestown Races. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 21 and over in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. 1 boost per eligible game. Opt-in required. Max bet $50. 10-plus leg requisite for 100% boost. Eligibility, wagering, and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/baseball terms.
Welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. I'm Michael Spinella, and you can find me on Twitter at the Spinella. With me in the studio is the president and founder of Rocket Sports, Rick Stevens. You can follow him on Twitter at Rocket Sports. You can also follow Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Plus, check out our website, canadiensconnection.fm. And just a little reminder here to subscribe to the Canadiens Connection podcast here in the player on your favorite podcasting app, wherever you get your podcasts, so that you never miss a single episode throughout this busy off season. So it's time for our midsummer edition of the Rocket Sports Mailbag. We're happy to hear from our Canadiens Connection listeners. The mailbag was jam-packed with questions and comments about the NHL draft, roster changes, and predictions for next season. A mix of Facebook direct messages, emails, texts, comments on YouTube, and like any other way you can reach out to us. In this episode, we're going to respond to questions on David Reinbacher, Alex Newhook, Matvei Michkov, Joel Edmondson, Philip Zadina, and more. And Rick, I'm very excited to get to this. Always enjoy the questions from our listeners. They have great questions to ask, and honestly, probably one of my favorite segments to do personally.
For sure. And to hear how our listeners have thought about issues, have rolled it over in their minds, have analyzed things, have listened to us, it's all very gratifying. And the questions that they ask are typically very intelligent.
Yeah, and it shows that our listeners really are paying attention and listening to our content too, which feels great to hear back. So
absolutely.
Starting things off, as we do have plenty of questions to get to, let's turn over to Tim from St. John, New Brunswick. And what he had to say is, hey guys, we really enjoy the show. Me and my hockey buddies were having a beer and discussing the Habs' #1 pick, which I happen to love. But the question is, why does it seem right-handed defensemen are harder to acquire than left-handed defensemen? Or are we perceiving that incorrectly? Thanks for your professional and focused show. So thank you very much for that message, Tim. I'll start this one off, and I think it's quite simple, the answer to this. I think that there are just fewer right-handed defensemen than there are left-handed defensemen, and I think that actually goes for most positions, even forwards. And just reading through an article on NHL.com from May 2020, it states that roughly 60 to 70% of NHL players are left-handed shooters, depending on the season, of course. So it's quite a big difference. And Rick, I'll let you provide your insights for this.
Yeah, for sure. The only modification I would make. He says, Tim says, are we perceiving this correctly or incorrectly? When he says left-handed defenseman, I think what he means there is left-shot defenseman. Because as it turns out, left-handed defensemen are right-shot defensemen. And you're exactly right, Michael. 2/3 of, in general, 2/3 of all players in the NHL are right-handed, and that means they're left-shot. It doesn't stay true in every country, but in North America, in Canada especially, when children are taught to play hockey, they play with their dominant hand at the top of the stick. So if you're right-hand dominant, that goes at the top of the stick. That makes you a left-hand shot. Since the majority are right-handed, it's that instruction is going to produce more left-shot hockey players. Similar in Major League Baseball, left-handed starting pitchers. There are fewer of them, so they make more money than right-handed starting pitchers. It's just the way it goes. And if you need any more evidence, watch the signing ceremony, the signing video that I referred to earlier. David Reinbacher is going to sign his contract with his left hand, meaning he's a right shot player. And yes, they are more rare. And yes, there are players who can play both sides, especially left shot players who can play both sides. But it's just not natural the way you pick the puck off the boards and so on. So you kind of want folks on their strong side.
Yeah, so if I were hypothetically to have a child and that child was interested in playing hockey and they were left-handed, meaning that they shoot right, I would definitely make them play defense because I think there's opportunity. Of course, kidding around a little bit. But our next question, and it's another interesting one. This one comes from George in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He says, "Hi guys, will the Canadiens take a chance on Filip Zadina? Had an amazing season with the Mooseheads. He seems to be the perfect fit for the Marty St. Louis Rehab Clinic. An underachieving former 6th overall pick might be worth it. Make it happen, Kent." And thank you for reaching out to us, George. I'm assuming you're a Halifax Mooseheads fan and you had plenty of time to watch this player. So to start this one off, I'll defer to you, Rick.
Yeah, is he a perfect candidate for the Marty St. Louis Rehab Clinic? And I like how you phrased it, George. Absolutely. Except that rehab clinic has a limited number of seats. Assuming that Alex Newhook is there, assuming that Kirby Dach isn't yet to his full potential, assuming Lias Andersson is going to be entered into that quote-unquote clinic, and because the Canadiens have such a large number of forwards, no, I don't think that there's room for another forward, never mind one that needs to a pass into the clinic. The issues with Filip Zadina, we remember he had such a strong junior career in the queue, and he was going to fill the net because the Canadiens didn't take him, and it just didn't come to pass. Do I think that he might be a late bloomer? That's certainly possible. And with the contract, the way the contract was terminated, that's out of the way. I think that there's going to be a team that takes a chance on him. I just don't happen to think it's going to be the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you said there. Just looking at Cat Friendly, it looks like the Habs have 12 forwards on their roster, and that's not including Jesse Ullinen, Lias Andersson, or Emil Heineman, who could be making a push this season. So I just don't think there's going to be a room for this player to come in. I still think Zadina has a lot of potential. He's a very skilled player. I think a lot of people fell in love with him as a prospect when he was playing in Halifax, but the fit's just not going to be in Montreal, although I think that another team might have an opportunity for him.
Yeah.
The next question comes in from Matt in Greenfield Park, Quebec. And he says, great show, guys. And I'm not just saying that to get my question read. Canadiens Connection is my favorite Habs podcast. So we appreciate that compliment.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to get your question read on this podcast. So his question is, now here's my question. Why haven't we heard from Alex Newhook yet? Don't you think it's weird? Could Kent be trying to flip him? And that's an interesting question. I guess just looking at where he's at right now, he is an unsigned RFA. I don't know if that necessarily has anything to do with it. I know contracts sometimes take a while to get done. But you look at what Montreal gave up to bring in this player, a first and a second. I don't think that there's really a trade out there that would be valuable enough or more valuable than the first and second round picks that they gave up to acquire him. So I'm not sure that they're looking at flipping him out. And of course, he does have a relationship with Kent Hughes, Kent being his former player agent. So I'd be surprised if that didn't weigh in as a factor as well.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And a good catch by Matt in Greenfield Park in the South Shore. We remember the language when the Canadiens traded for him. It was for the rights to Alex Newhook, given that he hasn't been signed to the Montreal Canadiens a contract yet. I think that is the reason. The Canadiens, we said, paid a huge price, 31 and 37, especially in the draft we've just come through. They've got to really value this player highly, and think he's grossly underachieved so far in order to pay that high price for him. So, investing that much in him, I don't think they're going to be moving him at all. And I expect once he's signed, and I don't think there's any, you move through contracts. There's time to do that over the summer. Yeah, he's an RFA. There's other RFA contracts to be signed. I expect we're going to be having him in a Zoom call very soon.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it as well. Another question comes in from Alex in Tecumseh, Ontario. What he has to say is, I know that there have been a lot of talks about the Canadiens making the playoffs next year, but I just don't see it. Do you think that they will finish in the bottom 5 next season again? And that's a really good question. Not sure where the noise of them making the playoffs next year is necessarily coming from, but Rick, I'll get you to start this off.
Well, it was coming from Kent Hughes, who said in the year-end press conference, we're not ruling out the playoffs. We're not going into next season assuming that we won't make the playoffs. That's a little different than the way it's been twisted in the media and the way fans have grabbed onto it, saying Canadiens are going to make the playoffs next year. But I think this is a great question because it's all about expectations. And for the last couple of years, the expectations were very low, and the Canadiens met them. They met those low expectations, and I think still they played an entertaining brand of hockey, and Canadiens fans were satisfied, even though they finished near the bottom of the standings. Now, what's going to happen next season? Have they done enough to make a move? I think you got to look at the East and the teams that they're going to be competing against. Maybe have done a little bit more. So I think it's going to be difficult to make the playoffs. Saying that, there's still a good part of the summer to go. Is there a trade? Is there something that can improve the team for this year? We're going to make, as we did last year, we're going to make our regular season predictions, and that's going to come in one of our shows in September, our prediction show. But I have noticed that there are, CBS Sports put out their projected way too early standings. They had the Canadiens 26th, I believe. Corey Pronman put out his mock draft for 2024. He has the Canadiens picking third. I think he based his projections on the Vegas odds of winning the Stanley Cup and ordered them that way. So out there's an opinion that the Canadiens are going to finish, if not in the bottom 5, in the bottom 10 next season and won't make the playoffs. So I think, Alex, you're absolutely right that that you're not seeing the reason that they'll be a playoff-bound team, and that's entirely possible the way it could work out. Or, if the Canadiens have an injury-free season, what's that going to do with the lineup they have? That's yet to be seen.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. I guess to give a little preview on my bold predictions, I do think bottom 5 is right where they should be. I kind of listed out who else I think would round out that bottom 5. I think the Blackhawks, the Coyotes, the Flyers, and the Blue Jackets probably all within that area as well. Some teams that we did see in the bottom 5 last year. So I also look at the Atlantic Division, and there are a lot of question marks and a lot of very good teams in the Atlantic Division. I just don't think Montreal matches up well in this division at all. Tampa and Toronto are shoo-ins for the playoffs going forward. Boston, kind of a wild card, but I said that last year, and then they broke all the records for winning, so we'll see how that goes. I think they're good until further notice. Florida kind of barely made the playoffs, but again, they were very far ahead of the Montreal Canadiens in the standings. Where the Atlantic gets very interesting, though, is you have Ottawa, Detroit, and Buffalo all looking to make big leaps this year, try and push for the playoffs. So I just don't think it's the time for Montreal to make that push, especially within this division.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from Tom and Katie in Lakeland, Florida. Must be nice to be in Florida. What they had to say is, good luck to Joel Edmondson with the Washington Capitals. With him gone, who takes the A? Thanks for the great show, guys. We rely on you. So appreciate the compliments again, and it's a really good question. Joel Edmondson, of course, wore an A last season. He was a big part of that leadership core. Next season, it's hard to say. I guess making kind of a general prediction, I think they'll want a defenseman to wear an A. You look at Nick Suzuki wearing the C. I'm assuming Brendan Gallagher will keep the A as well. So those are 2 forwards in the leadership group. And looking at their defense, I see 2 veteran defensemen in David Savard and Mike Matheson. It kind of makes sense. Both have a ton of experience. Savard is a cup winner, a pretty good role model for the younger players. We talked about David Savard and the role he played mentoring Caden Gooley last season. So I think David Savard would be my pick, but I think either one of Savard or Matheson are the ones that make the most sense.
Yeah, and that does make sense. Great question from Tom and Katie. And I'm assuming they are one of the many Canadiens fans who get to Tampa and we see them on the broadcast, we hear them. And thank you for both listening to the podcast and supporting the Canadiens when you can, when they're down in your area. Nick Suzuki with the C, it's a given that Gallagher is going to have one of the A's. Now, I see this as going in one of two directions. That you can go with with one of the veteran, like Gallagher, you can go with a veteran. David Savard would be a perfect candidate, and David Savard wore the A at times last year when Edmondson was out of the lineup with injuries. You know how much they've invested in Mike Matheson and wanting him to represent this new step that they're taking. Could Mike Matheson wear an A? I think so, and maybe on a rotating basis. What about Monahan? And the leadership that he provides, and especially for the younger players. Or what if you went in an entirely different direction? What if you said, well, Nick Suzuki is the future, and we have an opportunity here to give an A to one of our young leaders? What about Caden Gooley? And you mentioned having an A on a defenseman. What better defenseman than Caden Gooley? What about Kirby Dach if he's going to be, the number 2 center? And again, they invested a lot to get him. So I think there's a lot of choices, but it's going to come down to what kind of priorities that the management group sees. And with this number of choices, I think that the group might be expanded from 2 alternates to maybe a rotating system to include a number of these people.
Yeah, I like the idea of having a rotating going around a few of these guys. Like the Goalie pick as well. He's going to be, I guess, the second year in the NHL. I don't know if that would be considered too early, but you've heard a lot about his maturity and him talking about some of the other prospects and calling them kids. So I think that's a really interesting pick too.
But the main question is, who's going to look after the playlist in the locker room? That was Edmondson's. He nabbed that job responsibility, and from all reports, he did a good job with it.
Yeah, I wonder if we do see Captain Nick take over. He went to the Nickelback concert with his good friend Cole Caulfield a few weeks back, so I can approve of that if that's his music choice. Next question comes in from Michelle or Michael from Lorette, Manitoba. What they had to say is, with the most offensively skilled group of forwards in a decade sitting there for the taking, I can't figure out why Kent Hughes played it safe with a defensive defenseman. Do you think they believe that they have enough top six forwards? He lists out Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, Kirby Dach, Juraj Slafkovsky, Sean Farrell, Alex Newhook, and then says, in the words of McKegg, is the cupboard full? Well, I don't know about quoting Grant McKegg for this one, but I'll kind of start this one off. I think that out of all the names you listed, to me, only 3 of them are bona fide top 6 forwards, and those are Suzuki, Caulfield, and Dach. The other ones, I think, still have a lot to prove. I think they really have to solidify themselves as NHLers even. So I don't think that Montreal's in a position where you can necessarily say the cupboard is going to be full. I don't think that there's anything wrong with stocking up on more and more of those forwards. I know that scoring is something that Montreal has knowingly not had a lot of over the past few decades even. So I don't think that that's the reason why they decided to do that. I just really feel like they valued David Reinbacher that much. And when they saw an opportunity to get a right shot defenseman, the top defenseman of his class projected anyway, they just didn't want to pass up on that.
This is a really good question, and there's a number of elements to it. And yes, I think what I like about this is that Canadiens fans are trying to make some logical sense of why the team went in the direction that it did. And you know, we've heard a number of scouts say that there was the dynamic skilled forwards at the top of this draft, within the top 10, are like you haven't ever seen. You know, best draft or best first round in a decade, and all those kinds of comments. So why did the Canadiens play it safe? Why did they go with a defensive defenseman? And we heard that one of the responses from Kent Hughes was, well, we think that Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, and Kirby Dach can give us more, that there is more offense to come from them. So there's, you know, I understand why Michelle in Lorette may have said, okay, maybe they're thinking we've got enough. But then you look around the league, and the Canadiens have a good prospect pool. They do. Do they have the best prospect pool? I think that would be a reach saying that. And you look at the talent of some of these teams, established talent, especially those that were went deep in the playoffs, or an up and coming team like Buffalo, who has a ton of talent. And no, the cupboard's full. And I found this amusing, and this comes up over and over again, certainly on Twitter. Grant McKegg, well, he does his thing, and it's fun at times. He ahead of the draft, he says 50 bold things, and he might hit on one, and that's what he sticks with. And this past draft, one of the things that he said was that he was guaranteeing that Matvei Michkov would fall into the second round, that all teams would pass him in the first round. Anyway, this goes back to something he posted on Twitter, and I don't. It was late 2017, early 2018, and he tweeted, the prospect cupboard is full. Let's end this talk about drafting and development. Let's let's push for a Stanley Cup. And he listed the prospect pool that apparently was full. And he had players like Ryan Poehling and Josh Brook and Joni Ikonen, Cale Fleury, Will Bitton, Victor Meta, Noel Jewison, Lucas Vedamo, Dan Audette, all of these players. He made a whole list, and somebody, he's deleted it since then, but somebody has screenshotted it and it circulates from time to time. So that's what Michel is getting at. But no, you can't have like that list. Not all of those players necessarily are going to hit. You need top elite players. You need depth scoring. You need more prospects than that. And I think that the Canadiens, as far as being a team that the goal is to compete regularly for the Stanley Cup, they're going to need some top prospects for the next few years to be able to get into that group.
I guess to add a little bit too, I would argue that there's more clarity on the Montreal defense core than there is up front in the forwards. You look at all the young players they have, Gouli, Barron, Harris. I think there's still some hope for Xhekaj and some of the other guys around. So I don't know that that's quite what they were doing when they targeted Reinbacher with that 5th overall pick. Next question comes from Stefan in Montreal, and he says it's a simple question. Simple answer, please. What is going to happen in goal this year? And for that, I'll turn it over to you, Rick.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. This is a brilliantly asked question by Stefan, because right away he boxes you in, saying it's a simple question, so give us a simple answer. When it's a simply worded question, a direct question, but this is a really complex situation and complex answer. So nicely done, trying to box us in. We're not going to take the bait, unfortunately, Stefan. This is an evolving situation, absolutely. Jake Allen. Jake Allen's moving into a new contract and is likely to be the starting goaltender. Sam Montembeault had a pretty good season last year. For every 2 good starts, he had 2 bad starts. But it was for Sam Montembeault, it was one of his better seasons. So I still think that he'll start as the backup and try to work his way up. Now, after that, all bets are off. Caden Primo, we know, he is no longer waiver exempt. He's subject to waivers. Will the Canadiens be willing to lose him, I should say, at the start of the season? Will he be claimed on waivers? He hasn't lived up to his potential. He's had an okay progression in the AHL. He's been dreadful in the NHL. Will he pass waivers? That's certainly possible. And down in Laval, well, we talked about Jakub Dobas. We talked about the 2 goaltenders that they signed, who will likely spend time in both Laval and Trois-Rivières. This is an evolving situation, and we still haven't talked about it. There's a chance that Jake Allen's moved over the summer. There's a chance, and Kent Hughes talked about it, maybe signing an experienced NHL backup. Too many moving parts to provide a simple answer, unfortunately.
Well, when you say potentially signing an experienced NHL backup, I wonder if Yaroslav Halak is still looking for a contract. That'd be cool to see him back. I don't think that's actually going to happen, though. But I guess my simple version of the answer is they're probably going to roll it back with Allen and Montembeault and probably give Primo some opportunities as well, since he's going to be making some one-way money. I guess to expand a little bit more, I think next offseason is really the time for Montreal to address the goaltending need. It's the final year on Montembeault's contract this season. You have Allen locked up on a pretty big contract. I don't know that that's going to be a movable contract given where Allen is in his career. I think Allen probably ends up starting the majority of the games. Montembeault, I guess, taking the backup or 1B role on this team anyway, and that's kind of where it's at the moment. I just feel like for this, when Ken Hughes handed Montembeault a 2-year contract and extended Allen, I felt that this was kind of a punt for dealing with goaltending down the road, and I think next offseason is really the time we'll see more clarity, especially since this team is still rebuilding. I think Allen Montembeault as a tandem on a rebuilding team is fine. They'll get you right into that bottom 5 where you want to be, right?
And one possibility that we didn't cover, that is, will the Canadiens carry 3 goaltenders? That's going to be difficult, especially with the number of extra forwards that they're going to have to accommodate in their starting opening day lineup.
But there are some teams out there that are carrying 3 goaltenders around. That we've seen that at times. You look at Carolina going with Ranta, Anderson, and Kochetkov. Vegas going through probably 5 goaltenders at a time. I'm not going to name all of them, but there might be some precedents for this. But like you said, I don't know that there's going to be enough room on the roster.
Yeah.
And our final question in this mailbag comes from Cyril in North Battleford, Saskatchewan. When what he had to say is, it seems that Montreal media is trying to sweep the draft under the rug for fans on Twitter, and fans on Twitter are helping. Apparently, you either believe that David Reinbacher was the best pick since Guy Lafleur, or you are to blame for his hate mail. But I still want to know why the Habs passed on Matvei Michkov. Did he tell them that he wouldn't play for Montreal as it was rumored? I know you guys will tell me the truth. And Rick, I feel like you're the truth guy of Montreal podcast. I think that's fair to call you. I'll kind of start this off, but this is going to be mostly to set you up because I know you're going to have the bulk of the information here. Personally, I don't think we can really confirm this, but we know that there was an interview where the Habs mentioned that they believed that Reinbacher and Bedard were the 2 players closest to being NHL ready. I wonder if that's kind of what they were going for, maybe just being impatient and wanting somebody in right away. Listening to media availabilities in some places, they kind of say that they'll be drafting what they believe is the best player available, and then in another media availability, they talk about how they would have cooled on Reinbacher a little bit if he wasn't a right-shot defenseman. So with that, I'll send it over to you, Rick.
Well, that's a good point to start with about, I think that being NHL ready and being the top ranked players and when you look at potential are completely different things. And I think I've seen some folks out there on Twitter. I've seen some comments on our YouTube channel about that fans claiming that scouts have said that Bedard and Reinbacher were the 2 best prospects in the entire draft. That's false. That's a bald-faced lie. That's false. What people have said is that yes, Bedard and Reinbacher in their progression are closest to the NHL. Doesn't rank how they'll perform once they get there. Just said that given the way they play in their path, that they are close to the NHL. To be honest, I don't think there's a chance that Reinbacher is going to play for the Montreal Canadiens. Certainly not next season. I think the plan is to send him back. Although, he could play in Laval if need be. Having said all that, I think it's unfortunate the way this all kind of played out. That as like prospects, please get off social media. Please get off social media. And was he getting, text? No, he was getting comments on his social media. We know that some of them were very derogatory. We know that many of them came from fan bases not associated with the Montreal Canadiens, Leafs fans, Bruins fans, said some nasty things. And once that happened, all of a sudden, it wasn't cool anymore to provide any kind of criticism about the pick. That everybody had to be on board and cheerleading, or else you weren't a real fan, in quotes, of the team. And that's really, really unfortunate. We should be able to have a dialogue, as we try to do here. And yes, I appreciate Cyril saying that he trusts us for the truth, because we're not going to sugarcoat things. We're not going to put out information for clicks. We're going to give you what we know. And sometimes we don't know the whole story. As far as Reinbacher, was this the best pick possible, or was this done for need? It seems to be, from all of the comments from the scouting staff, and Bobroff and Lapointe, it seems to be need that this was considered a right-handed, a right shot defenseman was considered to be something that was difficult to obtain. And that they thought the draft was the best time to grab a player like that. As far as Michkov, I really think that the Canadiens were out pretty early. I think they set their sights on Reinbacher. Now we were talking about Reinbacher as being one of the top choices for the Canadiens in May. I think they had him top on their list way earlier than that. And that it was his place to be knocked from. And I think I've said it before, and it concerns me a little bit. We keep hearing over and over again, Marty Lapointe and others say, this pick was unanimous. I hope it wasn't. I really hope. I hope he's just saying that. You want some debate. You want some discussion. You want somebody to say, no, I think Zach Benson is. No, I think Ryan Leonard is. No, I think Michkov is, if that was the case. It appears, and from what scouts have said, what Lapointe has said, it appears that what scared the Canadiens most was the character issues and the comments about the way he interacts with coaching staff, the way Michkov interacted with teammates and veterans on the team. Character issues seem to be the reason that they were out right away. And why would this be an issue? Can you bring someone into a locker room who has character issues? Well, you certainly can if Shea Weber's your captain. He'll straighten that out in no time. However, and this is no criticism against Nick Suzuki, but Nick is a young captain, and he's a new captain, and his stature isn't that of a Shea Weber or even a Joel Edmondson for that matter. He's learning to be a captain, and he may not be able to rein somebody in like a veteran player would be able to do. And so I think for all of those reasons, and I know there's been suggestions out there, comparisons made to Logan Mailloux, and that Jeff Molson stepped in and said that he didn't want to go through the controversy with Michkov, make a safe pick. That's a theory. There's lots of theories. I just think it happened. It happened to be character issues, and so by the time the Canadiens met with Michkov in person at the draft, their decision was already made. They went through the motions. They met with him, but I don't believe that it was Michkov telling the Canadiens he wouldn't play for him. I mean, why would he meet with them if that was the case? I think it was they had in their mind that he was not going to be their pick, and that's been something that's he wasn't on near the top of their list, and that's been the case for quite some time.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer to this, Rick. I know that there are a lot of people speculating out there. And, as much as I love taking a right turn into Speculation Nation, I think it's important that we report on what's been said and the information that we actually have out there. So I'm hoping that everyone appreciates that answer. And big thanks to Cyril for asking this question. I think it's an important thing for us to address as well.
And I think Cyril phrased it really well. There was another question earlier from Michelle and Lorette. I could tell you that the mailbag, whether it was text, whether it was emails, there were a ton of questions about this issue. I thought they phrased it rather well, and were representing all of the other questions we had. But just because your question didn't make it on the air, we want to thank you for reaching out. I'm going to do my best to answer most of those directly. And we encourage you that if any of the answers that you heard here today that weren't quite what you're looking for, that you had another question in mind, reach out to us again. We're always happy to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. And please make sure that when you do reach out to us, include your first name and where you're from. That way we know who we're talking to, just like everyone who we answered questions for today. And like you said, Rick, tons of great questions. Wish we could do this all the time. Wish we could do more. But unfortunately, it's going to be all that we're going to get to today. But that's not all that we are going to ask of our listeners. We also have a question for our Canadiens Connection question of the week that we will ask our listeners as well. And that question is, which prospect impressed you the most at Canadiens Development Camp? We want to make sure we hear from you, and we'll take our final break here to let you think about it. We'll hear from our sponsors, and make sure you stay with us. This is the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio.
The Canadiens Connection is proud to be a partner of Rocket Sports Media, digital media publishers of sports and entertainment websites. Their mission is to build a worldwide network of sports fans who are informed, engaged, entertained, and connected. Learn more about RSM, its team, and its portfolio of brands at rocketsportsmedia.com. I bet you enjoy sporting your best Habs jerseys, dressing up your kids and pets in the cutest Habs gear, and showing off your decked-out hockey cave or fanning. Well, don't just show your friends, show your Habs. The team at All Habs wants you to boast your finest pictures for our global network of Montreal Canadiens fans. Include the hashtag #ShowYourHabs when posting your fan photos on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Then log on to showyourhabs.com to see your entries, along with photos and posts from Habs fans all over the world. A proud member of the Rocket Sports Media Network. If you're a business owner looking for the perfect platform to reach a targeted audience of customers, Rocket Sports Media is the solution. Our global hockey community provides unmatched social media reach to an attentive demographic of sports and entertainment fans. We can provide visibility to your company, helping you to engage and leverage this prime group of potential clientele. In addition, we also offer sponsorship opportunities for fan events and featured areas of website content, giving you name and logo recognition. Visit rocketsportsmedia.com to contact us regarding this unique marketing opportunity. For the most trusted source of news, analysis, and features about the Montreal Canadiens, their affiliates, and their prospects, log in to allhabs.net, your year-round resource for anything Habs related. That's allhabs.net.
Welcome back to episode 251 of the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. Please make sure you're following at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Plus, you can check out our website, canadiensconnection.fm. Also, you can feel free to text us anytime via the Rocket Sports text line, 5853-ROCKET. That's 5853-ROCKET. And that was a really awesome mailbag that we just did, so definitely keep those questions coming in. Like I said, too, when you do reach out to us, we appreciate when you leave your first name and where you're from. That way we know who we're chatting with, and we've got a pretty busy off-season to come to. And, Rick, it's hard to keep track of this team, isn't it?
Well, there's all kinds of ways that you can catch up with us. Be sure that you're subscribed to the podcast. But reach out to us on all our social media channels. We had a new one added this week. Yes, we are the Habs Connection, Canadiens Connection podcast is on Threads. Threads sprung out of nowhere from folks at Meta. So if that's your thing, we go where you are. If you're on Twitter, send us a message there. Threads, Facebook, Instagram. I think we even still have a Pinterest account if that's what you do. Yeah.
But most of our content, we do have the majority of it all in one spot, and that is at thn.com/Montreal. And that's where you're going to find all your Montreal Canadiens content. Also, make sure you're subscribed to us on YouTube. Just search @AllHabs and you will find our channel there. We started putting this podcast into the feed, but the main thing you'll find on there is the Habs Hockey Report Show, and that's hosted by Amy Johnson every single Thursday. This past week's episode is entitled Top 3 Priorities on the Habs Summer To-Do List. Amy Johnson does a great job providing video content. She's also great at interacting with all the viewers. Leave a like, leave a comment, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. Also, make sure you subscribe to both of our Rocket Sports Radio podcasts on your favorite podcast app. First and foremost, the Press Zone. You can find that at thepresszone.fm. All the episodes will be up on there, so if you've missed any, you can go back as far as you'd like and start listening through those. That's going to be your inside source for everything Laval Rocket, AHL, or Montreal Canadiens prospects. Again, hosted by Amy Johnson and our AHL guru, Patrick Williams. And it's a great show, and that comes out every single Tuesday. Also, make sure you subscribe to this podcast, The Canadiens Connection. You can find it at canadiensconnection.fm or on any podcast app. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're going to be here every single Saturday, even throughout the summer. I was listening to a few hockey podcasts this week, and they're already talking about going on vacation. And here on The Canadiens Connection, we don't do that. We're going to be here every single week. We don't take a break. And make sure you hit that subscribe button to get your Habs fix every single Saturday. And now it's time to get to our Canadiens Connection question of the week. To our listeners, we ask, which prospect impressed you the most at the Canadiens Development Camp? And we want to make sure that we hear from you. We provided our thoughts in that first segment, and we have a ton of development camp information at thn.com/Montreal as well.
Yeah, there is an article, as I mentioned earlier, that our top 5 standouts. Basically the ones we mentioned, Lane Hutson and Owen Beck and Logan Mailloux. We didn't talk, Philippe Machar looked pretty good as well. Adam Engstrom, a bit of a surprise, maybe forgotten, played in the SHL last year. He looked terrific at development camp. So tell us who you liked, and maybe you were there. Maybe you were in Brassard and got firsthand look. We really want to hear from you.
And we do have a YouTube comment and an email that we received this week that we'd like to read on air. And these are both regarding our episode 250 of the Canadiens Connection, entitled Half's Draft Extravaganza on YouTube. SB0182 wrote this to us. And what did he say, Rick?
Well, with regard to, we asked about who you would have picked in the number 5 slot if Michkov was available, and he wrote, "This is the worst pick in franchise history. Yes, worse than Doug Wickenheiser instead of Denis Savard in 1980. David Reinbacher instead of Matvei Michkov is worse." All right, I think he's clear. He's clear as a bell.
Yeah, we appreciate everyone's opinion, and thanks for that comment. We also have an email coming from longtime listener Dino, and what did Dino have to say to us?
He wrote us at hello@rocketsportsmedia.com saying, "I would have taken Ryan Leonard at 5th overall, high-end offense and grit, gotta take him. Guys like that are hard to find. There are only so many Kachuks. I liked your perspective, Rick, flipping the 2023 versus the 2022 Canadiens priorities to take defense in 2022 and an offensive forward in 2023. Very astute thinking, Rick, very astute. Almost Sam Pollock-ish. Sam Pollock, the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest general manager of all time. Any team but happened to be for the Montreal Canadiens. That's high praise from Dino. We really appreciate that. And yes, I was just spinning a theory. What if the Canadiens, rather than taking Juraj Slafkovsky first overall last year, had taken an offensive defenseman like David Jiricek, and maybe instead of taking the defenseman this year in a forward-heavy draft, took a Ryan Leonard. So thanks for that comment, Dino.
Yeah, and like I said, once again, to everyone reaching out to us, please leave us your first name and where you're from. We always enjoy finding out who we're talking to. A couple of things to look forward this week. Watch out for some RFA signings and possibly some trades and some UFA signings throughout the league and on the Montreal Canadiens. Also, the Just for Laughs Festival is going to be happening in Montreal. That's always a fun one, so make sure you keep an eye out on those. That's going to be a wrap for us today. Thank you all for listening. Please make sure you subscribe to the Canadiens Connection podcast in the player or on any of your favorite podcasting apps, and you can share it on social media if you like what you heard. Enjoy the week. We'll be back here next Saturday, July the 15th, for another great episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Visit allhabs.net for breaking news about the Montreal Canadiens.